Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of J70 Chats. We're going to give everybody a few minutes to kind of filter in here. While we're waiting, it's always good to give the class a shout out. And I know the three of us have all paid up, but whether you're a owner or Category 3 sailor, if you could go online and just renew your registration for this year, that would be awesome. It's especially important in these trying times to support the class that we love. And so that way, when we do get back to racing, we'll be able to kind of kickstart it and have no flaws. So I think we're just going to get started here, boys. Today we have Allan Terhune and Eric Doyle. Boys, are you there?
Hey, Alex, how are you?
Eric?
Hey, can you hear me, man?
I can hear you. Where are you, Eric? You've been flying all over the place. Where are you today?
Beautiful San Diego, California,
Nice.
Southern Cal. It's nicest.
Great. All right. Well, boys, we're going to jump right in. We're going to start at the weather mark. Again, today's presentation is all about sets, jibing, and douses. Allan, you sail with a wide variety of different programs. Here you are. It looks like you're just full rage mode, yelling, trying to pull up the spinnaker. What's going on? What do you got to tell the people about setting the spinnaker?
Yeah, well, thanks for putting all this together. First off, yeah, this is from Davis Island this year, sailing on the Building A. My buddy Josh and Francisco there, and my wife Kate is to the right side of the photo. But yeah, we're talking about putting the kite up, and this photo I actually like because we're doing quite a few things right, but we're doing quite a few things wrong here for sure. So I know one of the things I sail on the Vineyard Vines as well, and one of the things we talk about is keeping the boat flat going around the mark, and it's one of the things we're really not doing here. So Alex is drawing me on the rail. I wish I was that skinny actually, but I'm not. You probably should have made it a little bigger, but yeah, I think having someone hiking all the time is really important. When you get to this part of the course, it's really easy to get everyone off the rail like we did and not be able to turn the boat as smoothly and accelerate well. So I think that's always got to be priority one, just keeping the boat flat and trimming the sails and get on the offset leg. And that's something we just didn't do a great job of here. I think the second thing that's really important is you got to get the tack out of the hatch. And you know, one of the things that we do is make sure we just get the tack out and pre-feed it to the mark of where it would be cleated when the pole is all the way out. And you don't need to go further than that because when you're hoisting, you're just going to pull the pole out. I think the third key when you're getting into sets is having the driver really understand where the boat needs to be. And, you know, whether you're going to be in a high mode, do a high set, if it's just a normal set, or if it's a set where you need to get low and be able to jibe early, what the moding is and the communication. You know, Eric, I don't know, what are a few things you guys do when you're in this situation too?
Yeah, I'm with you on all your points. And the thing we like to try and do, getting near the weather mark, and we're trying to decide, you know, which way we're going to go. You know, are we going to continue to go straight? You know, like you said, oh, is it a big righty? Is it super long port? We got to set low and be able to jibe quickly. You know, it really helps out. Really helps out the whole team to know, you know, get everybody on the same page as to how what we're setting up to do. Normally, if it's lighter air, it's a big fleet, you know, someone's got to remind the helmsman that, you know, we need to have a good set here. We got to protect, make sure people don't just go high and go over the top of us, and then we get in the low lane and everybody's rolled. So those are all things we do ahead of time, so that we can focus on the task at hand while we're setting, you know, so we don't get all chicken winged up and forget what we're supposed to be doing and forget which way we're going. Because it's good to have a great set, but if it's, you know, 10-to-1 port to starboard, we need to know that right away and be able to have the kite up at the offset mark. You know, we focus on the offset of getting high, and then we're setting and jibing right away. Looks like maybe you could ease the bang too. Alex, Allan, it's got a little
for sure.
bend and boom. What were you doing here? Were you guys racing hard, or is this a practice day?
I mean, At least this photo shows all the boats behind us, right? I mean,
That's true. There's a lot of boats behind you. That's good.
There's
That's
a lot
good
of boats
look.
behind, so we'll take that look. But
Okay, good.
But I think the few good things for this photo is I think the sails are actually eased out enough, especially the jib. You see a lot of people come around, they leave the jib
nice.
nailed on, and they bear off and stop, which is good. But I think going back to it, you're right. I mean, keeping the boat flat is having someone hike like Alex drew on there is super important.
Yeah.
And I think what I learned is whoever's pre-feeding some of the lines, you can pull them from the rail, right? You don't have to be in the boat to pre-feed the tack. You can still be legs out and bend over and throw the sail out and pull the line behind you and do all that stuff because it's all right there on that starboard side. You don't have to be in to do it. So,
Allan, it looks like in this picture, it looks like you have the main trimmer hoisting. Now, there's many ways to skin the cat here. Talk about your favorite setting technique.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the boat and who's doing what. Usually when I get in this position, I try to give the main sheet to the driver. So, I sail in this boat, I trim the main. On the other boat I sail and I trim the jib. So it's a little different, but in both boats, actually the main trimmer hoists the kite. So what we do is have whoever, like when I'm on the rail trimming jib, which is what Francisco is doing in this photo, or what I would do is have legs out and kind of be pulling the tack line out and be hiking at the same time. Right. And I think if I was trimming, that's probably what I would be pushing hard to do would be hike. And then that way the main sheet trimmer's already legs in, could just grab the halyard and start hoisting when it's time. And the main trimmer can kind of see the angle a little cleaner to know when it's time to hoist instead of doing the 3, 2, 1 hoist. There's a delay. You could just do it right when you're on the right angle. It seems to work pretty well, but there's some boats where you can't hand the main sheet off or you choose not to, so that wouldn't necessarily be the right thing to do. And the main trimmer then would be kind of the default spin trimmer until the trimmer who hoists is done. So,
Eric, what's your favorite technique?
The way I've done it the past couple of years is I trim the jib from the rail. I come in and help the tack out of the hatch, help the clew around the shrouds, make sure that the leeward sheet is at a mark, a set mark, and maybe I have it under my foot so that it doesn't get kicked out of the cleat. And then I hoist the kite, and it usually goes pop because it's been trimmed and it's good to go. And then I go straight to the spin sheet.
Come on, Eric. You're a big, strong guy. That's why it goes pop. Me, I get huff and puff, and maybe I get 3/4 of the way up, but that's why I don't hoist the kite. When I trim the main, I actually hold the sheet. I trim the main, and then, I have big boy Pat Powell. He pulls it up in 4 pulls, and then boom, we're out of there.
Yeah,
but I think your point is the tactician has to be super clear on the reach leg. It's set, go straight, high set. We have a guy on our hip. He can't say a lot, but he's got to say something short and concise, to the point, and effectively communicate what the plan is for the first 10 boat lengths after the offset mark. So now we're going to take a look at Tim Healy. This is Tim Healy sailing Newport, Rhode Island. This video was taken a few years ago, and we'll just kind of roll it and see what you guys think. In our warm-ups for this, we certainly had some comments for Tim, but then Eric pointed out that he just goes scoreboard and tell us about how many world championships he's won. So here he is, just jibing introduction, and we'll start with you, Eric. This is Tim. What are you looking at from Tim in his technique?
This is a nice light air set going across the offset. I think one of the key things here, which I am a big proponent of, is you let the traveler down first, then you let the main sheet out a little bit. And along here, I like to let the Cunningham go in the out haul. Tack goes out, nice hoist, boat's nice and flat. It's fairly light, so Tim keeps it at a pretty nice angle there. And the kite basically goes pop, and then the jib gets furled. It's a pretty nice set. It's hard to argue with that.
Yeah. I think
what do you think?
The two things I took away is you notice as the kite is going up, right when it's made, you see Tim put the bow up enough to fill the kite. So he gets low enough. He turns the boat down low to get the kite up so it doesn't like blow back into the triangle there with the lowers. But as soon as it's up, he puts the bow back up, and you see it right around when they say made, or right here, he puts the bow up to fill, and it fills right away. My guess is too, we haven't really talked about it, is I guarantee they have marks on everything, right? So the spin halyard's marked when it's up, the tack line, the pole line are marked when they're out. So it's real clear. You just pull until you get to your marks, and it all works out. And I think that's pretty important. And you know, the one thing is it takes all 4 people to do this well for it to be a good set. If any part of it goes wrong, you know, it just doesn't work. And like, just even seeing here, just their crew weight, a little leeward heel, Tim puts the bow up, it fills right away, right in that set.
Hey, Allan, talk about the furl of the jib. What's the steps? You can't just rip it in. You're just going to ruin the jib.
Yeah. So first thing we always do, especially in lighter air, because you have the jib halyard off, hopefully you have good marks on your jib halyard, is we pull the jib halyard up so that when you start to furl, there's some luff tension. So that's usually key. The other thing on most boats, and Tim's boat, it's interesting, his furls kind of the factory stock way, which is counterclockwise. I usually rerun the furling line or retwist it, so when you furl the jib, it furls clockwise. It just makes it a little cleaner, I think, when you're coming off the windward mark in the starting line. So usually what we do is we say, you know, bear off. Once the kite is full, you know, pull the jib halyard on, furl the jib, and then watch it as you're doing it, just to make sure you're not, you know, torching the jib. Once you get one bad furl, there are going to be bad furls from there on out because the creases go in it. But, you know, watching that, and as soon as the jib is furled, I put the jib back to the upwind setting, because if you wait till the leeward mark, you forget all the time. So I just pull it tight, furl, and then let it right back down.
Yeah, and for those of you who, the arrow on the screen indicates those bad wrinkles that Allan is referring to. If you're in charge of furling the jib and you start to see this, you need to stop immediately, pull the jib back out, make sure the halyard tension is correct, and then furl the jib. It's worse for the long haul if you just furl it in, because, you know, the next beat, now you got a furl and you're looking at or bad furl and a wrinkle, and then you're going cattywampus, and then you're calling Eric, and in the middle of the race, just getting a new jib, and it's never really that fun.
Complaining, so. You can't see the telltales, start whining.
Yeah, it's just all chaotic. So that's good. So let's transition now. You've had a really nice set. You're sailing away. Let's say you're, you know, in first place, extending. Yes. You know, you're in the soak VMG displacement mode. Let's talk about what a good jibe might look like. Eric, why don't you lead us off here? What does a good soaking jibe look like?
Again, I think, you know, communication is key. You got to get everybody on the same page. You got to say, hey, we're thinking about jibing here. You know, we're talking about it, so everybody's a little bit on their toes. Nobody's falling asleep. And then we make the call, okay, you know, jibing in 2-1. With a VMG jibe, you know, we don't have the jib out. We're sailing as low as we can without parking the boat up. So it's a pretty slow, steady turn down by the helmsman. It's not really quick. What's done quick is the kite gets pulled across quickly. And it helps to get it filled quicker if one crew member forward by the shroud will push the clew down just a little bit. That helps pop the leech of the kite. And then you should assign someone to do that. And then usually it's the trimmer who knows or the main sheet trimmer, who can see when the kite is fully filled, feels when the boat is loaded up, and will count down to a flatten and be like, you know, I usually do an hour boat. So I'm trimming the kite in and I'm like 3, 2, 1, okay, you know, flatten. Because I know when the boat is rocked up. We don't want the boat to rock up so hard that the helm loads up, you know, but we do want it to heel over a little bit so that when we all go to the high side together, we give a good hard pump on the boat and we help get some of that back that we burned off as we were jibing. And then, you know, immediately we try and get to the same positions that we were sailing before, you know, forward in the boat, easing the spinnaker, and very quickly talking to the helmsman about the speed and the angle, like we did on the other jibe. It's probably the slowest jibe we do, so that's why it's important to get back to our positions and get the boat back on track and as quickly as we can, you know, get the boat settled.
Allan, you got anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think Eric's hit on everything. To me, the two keys are, you know, the helmsman really understanding the rate of turn. And, you know, obviously every day that's light air is different, right? There's different sea states, there's different, you know, just everything's a little different, just like going upwind. So that's why I think in lighter air, it's crucial to get out early and do a couple jibes to get a good feel for it, because the rate of turn is everything. If you turn too fast, the kite doesn't get through and the whole thing is just screwed up. If you turn too slow, the boat just bleeds all of its speed. And then when you come out of the jibe, you got to put the bow way up to accelerate again. So the rate of turn is really important. I also think the main trimmer, kind of watching the main come in and kind of letting the boom fall to center line as you're jibing. Hopefully the kite is already through, and then give the batten a good pop before the main goes back out. I think one of the big mistakes in this lighter air is people forcing the boom through too early, and they backwind the kite. I don't know if Eric agrees with that, but they kind of throw the boom through and backwinds the kite really bad, and the boat just doesn't accelerate.
Yeah, it's best to main just flop over on its own.
Yeah, let the main kind of just naturally go, and sometimes you even stop it if you need to. If the kite's not easing yet, you pull the boom, like, you know, I'll just grab the end of the boom, pull it down to get the battens to pop, and then you may just slowly ease it out as the kite's getting eased, they go together.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And just like, you know, when you're sailing upwind and you go to let the main, if you let the main all the way out, the boat just, the slot totally closes. Same thing downwind. If you finish your jibe and you let the main go all the way out, then the slot is totally closed. And there's no airflow and your apparent wind takes a long time to kind of start over again. So really great point. I do that same thing. I have to, you know, I'm a little smaller, so I have to kind of hang on it monkey style to get it through, and I slowly let it out. But are you looking for any feedback from the driver, Allan? You sail with some incredible helmsmen.
Yeah.
What kind of feedback are you looking for from a driver standpoint?
A lot of times is finding when they're comfortable with a flat spot or when they feel the boat is loaded up enough. Sometimes if the tactician's saying that we're going into a jibe, a lot of the drivers will say, okay, like I'm going to heat up just a little bit to make sure they have pace going into the jibe. I know that happens a lot on the Vineyard Vines. Like if it's light air and we're going to jibe, John will say, all right, I'm going to put the bow up for, 2 or 3 seconds just to get a quick, 0.2 of a knot burst. So when we go into the jibe, the bleed isn't as bad and we have enough pace to get through. Because I think it's really easy to say, all right, we're jibing, and you kind of do the slow bleed down. All of a sudden your speed is almost nothing. And then you try and jibe and you can't really do anything. So I think that's a big key to it. And then just the helm, just kind of feeling if the boat gets draggy, if you have too much heel or not on it going into the jibe, right?
Yeah, great points. And so on that, here's some video. This is Allan. Allan, you're sailing with
I'm on the
Hardesty and the 3-ball, and then behind is the Whale.
Yeah.
So here you guys are. This is, one thing that's really cool about this video. This video was taken in Marblehead, but this could be a similar condition in Marina del Rey next year, where you have some slop coming at you, some waves coming at you on the bow. Talk about the jibing technique, Eric, when you're jibing and chop. What's really important here to make sure you have good jibes?
Oh, it's so painful in the chop. I think it's hard to find a good spot, but it's important to go into it with a little bit of speed. Like Allan was talking about, a nice slow steady turn. You can see on this next jibe here from the Vineyard Vines that everybody stayed on the new low side, and there was a nice pump. Like everybody went across the boat to get look. Everybody, the main drifts across. Everybody's on the low side, and then everybody goes across to weather. You see how the mast go back to weather, very in a very direct and consistent manner. It's a nice little pump exit out of that jibe. We don't get one here, but it's a float the clue out, let the main drift across. Main spinnaker comes across quickly, Not much flat in there on that boat. Not much at all. I think they must be getting near the mark because the jib went out. So there's a lot going on.
I'd actually argue, Eric, that's an example of the main coming over, like the turn was almost too fast, right? It could have been a little slower to get the kite through right here. And the main could have been a little, like it was, the turn was just too quick.
A little bit too quick, yeah.
One thing that sticks out to me is whoever is, I think that was probably Rob Lindley on the bow. He look at how tight the boom vang is to help the batten get through. You know, you guys are near the mark, and you probably have a lot going on right afterwards. You know, the thought process from him to trim the vang hard to make sure the batten gets through is really good. You know, especially when there's a lot going on, just pay attention to the controls in your area and look up every once in a while.
Yeah, good point.
So moving on, this new kind of phenomenon that we've seen in the fleet is driving the kite to a wing. And Allan, why don't you walk us through the scenario in which you do that and just talk about the mechanics behind it.
Yeah, so, you know, you have two situations. You can either go boom over wing or kite over wing, right? And I think the newer trend is, or at least my go-to is, if you're coming off the mark, you're on starboard. You know, in a perfect world, you'd be on starboard tack, you'd go kite over wing, and then you would go boom over and go on to port jibe if you need to get back to the middle of the course. That would kind of be a standard go-to move if you could do it all the time. So we practice a lot of doing the kite over wing. So I think a couple of things that need to happen is you obviously have to bear off and get the boat just about dead downwind or even a little by the lee, and then you pull the kite through it. And a couple of things that help do that is getting weight on the windward side, and really working on the turn, and the spinnaker trimmer talking to the driver constantly. And I use bow left, bow right, because it's really hard to keep track of up or down once you get in this wing on wing situation. And then once the kite is full, getting the boat from by the lee or dead downwind to a slightly, you know, I don't want to say reachy angle, but you know, the masthead fly aiming on the spinnaker side, like where the driver would be sitting, so the boat gets powered up again. I think it's really easy to get the kite over and get on the wing, and then folks stay too low and there's just not enough pressure in the sails. You got to put the bow back up, per se, to get the sails loaded up again.
Yeah. And, you know, another thing, the way that I like to think about it is, if you get headed with a puff, you're probably going to jibe the kite. If you get lifted with a puff, you're going to jibe the boom.
Yes.
So that's kind of how I compartmentalize it. So here's another great video. This is the 3-ball. Allan is there. He's pulling the kite over. Notice how all the weight is on the weather side. He gets it through, and then he lets the clue go. And then he just does some really nice illegal leaning over the side of the boat.
Yeah, we were pushing it quite a bit to see how far we could go and not, you know, be visibly bad. And our coach was like, yeah, it's pretty bad. So you can see I'm definitely too far out here in doing this. The boat in front of us is not. But I think you're right. Going back, the key was, you know, the driver bore off. We got weight to windward. And as soon as the kite came through, the weight got relaxed. And then the bow went back to the right.
See right there, they're almost by the lee. And notice Hardesty is over there holding the boom.
Yep. And then
just making sure it's not going to collapse. Yeah.
He moves to leeward pretty quick, or the boom side, to flatten the boat out. And it all depends. Some drivers do it different. Like some drivers like to hold the sheet while they're driving. Some don't. So a little bit of it depends too on who you're sailing with.
One thing that's also really nice, if you notice how Jack is using his tiller, he's got the classic Southern California frying pan technique going on. When it's really easy to overdrive when you're on wing, and it's especially easy if you're not quite right. A lot of the newer helmsmen that are new to this technique will just push the tiller all the way over. It's not so good. You want to have the tiller on the deck. You want to have full control of the tiller, but you want to make minute adjustments. You want to really adjust your weight to help turn the boat rather than the rudder. Would you agree with that, Eric and Allan?
Yeah, absolutely. I like to, you know, if I'm flying the kite, it's nice if the helmsman has a hiking stick, you know, pegged to the deck. you know, and if I want the boat to go up a little bit, I'll stand up and lean in till the boat corrects its course that I want to get a little more pressure, and it's okay, it's good. Or if we're sailing in a straight line, we want to bear off a little bit, you know, I might shuffle my weight out a little bit more, lean out just for a second to get it down. That's the best way to keep the boat going straight without too much rudder movement. And then I really like also Allan's, you know, you do get confused, and I'm the same way. It's hard to sail with a wing on wing because you got to look up at the Windex, try and keep that at a steady angle, and you're talking, you know, bow left, bow right, and keep the boat going. Because the worst thing that can happen is you go into a wing and it's really hard to get the kite filled, and then it doesn't stay filled, or it collapses, and any kind of gain you were hoping to make kind of gets negated because you just haven't been trimming the sail properly. It's just been luffing, basically. So it takes quite a big amount of teamwork, especially if it's marginal winging conditions, you know. And we like to, depending on what boat you got, we like to look at the speedo when we start thinking about, oh, this might be a winging condition. You know, we'll look at it going into it, say the boat's going 7 knots. We say, well, that's good. If we come out and the boat's going 6 knots, but almost straight at the mark, that's kind of what we feel like is a rough number for going to the wing and having a gain from it.
Yeah. Yeah. So there, you know, does John like to hold the kite out, Allan? Is he one of those skippers?
It varies, I think. Sometimes yes, sometimes
Okay.
no. But I think one of the keys to the wing too is, as Eric was saying, the communication, right? So if you're going to go on the wing, I think it's really important for the tactician to say either boom over wing or kite over wing. So everyone on the boat knows what the maneuver is, right? Because they're both very different. And then once you're on the wing, it's, you know, kite over jibe or boom over jibe, right? So that way you know how you're getting on and off the wing, and it's very clean, just saying, you know, which sail is moving. And that way it's not like there's no confusion. It's not like, oh, the bow's turning left, and then everyone's like, well, what does that mean? You know, or whatever. It's just very plain and simple. The driver knows, everyone on the boat knows. I think that's a super critical part. And then when you're going straight line, the bow left, bow right, because otherwise it can get very confusing very quickly.
Yeah. You know, if the sea state is flat and it's marginal planing versus winging, I like winging pretty much all the time, because marginal planing, you're sailing, you know, 40 to 60 degrees higher than straight at the mark. So this is a really powerful tool. Like if you go sail Davis Island, you know, here in San Diego, we sail in South Bay, you sail a whole run wing on wing. You know, it's a great tool to have in your bag, and you know, you got to get good and you got to get comfortable with it, because it's definitely a part of J70 sailing. So let's talk about the other.
So hold on, Alex. We got a question for you in the chat. Someone wanted you to explain more about if you're in a header puff, why you go kite over. If you're in a lifting puff, why you go boom over.
So so let's just say, for example, you're, you know, regardless of what the fleet is going on around you, let's just say you're sailing by yourself. Say you get a puff header. If you jibe the kite over, you're still sailing technically on that same jibe. So say you're sailing starboard jibe, you get a puff header, and you jibe the spinnaker. Now you're still on the starboard jibe, you're still on the headed jibe, and you're now able to sail lower with pressure. If you were to get that same puff header and jibe the boom, now you've changed jibes, and now you're on port jibe, and theoretically you'd be sailing the lift rather than the header. So you'd be heading up rather than heading down. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Does to me. Yeah.
Cool.
So likewise, when you get a lift.
Yeah, then you flip if you get lifted, then you flip the boom over, and now you're on the headed jibe and you can sail lower.
Right. So a couple of questions here, and Eric, you can grab these too. So Ted is asking if we let the tack off when we're going wing on wing. You can take both of these at once, actually. And is there a wing angle that you shoot for, like where the Windex normally would be when you're on the wing, if you're trimming?
Yeah, we haven't ever had any success letting the tack off, because again, anything to stabilize the boat. If you're sailing along in a nice winging condition with plenty of breeze, it's not that hard. But sometimes you sail into a lull. It's tough to keep the kite going. You don't want to jibe. You don't want it to collapse. So if there's a couple of things that are very important. The first thing, we want to keep the boat very steady on the angle of heel. If there's waves coming from behind, the boat starts rocking side to side, it makes it doubly hard to keep the kite filled. And if we were to ease the tack up, that would shake the kite even more. So the answer is, I've never had any success letting the tack up at all. And usually if I'm flying the kite on the wing, I'm looking up at the Windex at the same time. It's kind of a pain in the neck, literally, but I want to see it. And we're not sailing the boat by the lee. We're probably sailing at 170 true, something like that. So the Windex is just facing, not quite dead downwind, just about 10 degrees high of that. And we try and keep that kind of steady. It's easy to screw the helmsman up looking at that too much, because there's vortices up there and the thing will spin around sometimes, but that's the general goal. If I see it facing the other way, the other side of the boat, then I'm calling, bow, from port, bow left. So not dead downwind, because that's not the fastest angle. It's, if you sail big boats offshore, it's like 170, 175 true, something like that. If you were to put a number on it.
It seems like to me, if you get too far by the lee, it almost feels like the boat's getting pulled sideways, right? Like it's
not good.
Right.
And if you're holding the boom over and the boom starts wanting to come over and jibe, then you definitely need to head up. The boom, when the wing is steady, the boom is kind of balanced on the leeward side, and the kite is pretty balanced on the weather side. If the sails start to get imbalanced, something is probably a little up.
Right.
Kind of like sailing a CFJ. If you're sailing your CFJ and you got your jib winging, and if your jib starts to collapse, you need to make an adjustment, or if your main starts to come over, then you need to make an adjustment.
For all of us,
so now
for all of us East Coasters, that would be like a 420. We don't know what a CFJ
is. Yeah. True. Or your starboat for you guys.
Your starboat, right? Exactly.
So now let's talk about jibing the boom to a wing-on-wing and the mechanics behind that. Eric, why don't you talk about how you transition into that mode?
So the important thing again is, we say, hey, we're going to wing here, and we're going to say how we're going to do it. We talk about winging the kite, pulling the kite around. I would say we're going to wing. We're just going to move the boom across. So this again is it's all teamwork. The bow guys got to pull some vang on so we don't get hung on the backstay. The boat bears off quite a bit, but we want to try and keep a little bit of weather heel. And we want to get the boom to the other side and filled out against the shroud. So the main trimmer has to work hard on popping it in the middle so the battens go the other way. We keep a little bit of heel in the boat to make sure that the kite, the boom's come across, and it's kind of created this vacuum as it's pulled away from the wind away from the spinnaker. So we pull that over, pop it through, make sure the battens don't hang on the backstay, have the bow person looking up and then holding it out against the shrouds. And then we come out with just a little bit of weather heel to help the kite stay filled so we don't have to over trim it. And then we very quickly get back in our spots. We're looking at the Windex, we're talking about the angle, talking about if there's boats behind that are going to disturb our wind. We might need a little bit of help. We might need a little more pressure in the kite. We might need to bear our head up a little bit. So that's feedback from the tactician coming to the trimmer, going to the helmsman. But, it's interesting that in the beginning we were all about, for the wing, jibing the boom first, because we felt like, I wasn't collapsing the kite. But as the teams have gotten better and better, it's nearly as fast to jibe the kite over. And what's funny is sometimes it's the right condition, like in South Bay, a lot of times, as soon as you get a clear lane, you wing right away. But you might be winging going the wrong way. It's one thing we really didn't talk about too much, but it's winging, swapping the wing, basically, jibing the kite and flipping the main over. That's kind of thing. Because then you end up, because if if you're aiming right at the mark, that's ideal, right? Your VMG is 100%. You're going right at it. Well, if you get a big lift and you're wung out, maybe if you jibe both, then you're still wung, but you're going right at the mark this time. Your VMG is increased. And that's kind of the same principles apply. Come out with windward heel, make sure the boom's hung, and it's all the way out by the shrouds, and the battens are popped.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there has been some discussion, Eric, about, we had a coach that pushed it towards, they're called the double butterfly, where you're talking about switching the height and the main at the same time. And, no one's really done it yet, but there could be something to it, right?
Oh, we've practiced it.
Yeah, exactly.
Here's a nice boom jibe to the wing.
So I think the one thing from this video that I see, and it's a common mistake, is Tim here in this video doesn't force the boom over. He waits till he gets low enough that the boom wants to come over. I think you see a lot of folks who struggle on the wing. They're pulling the main like as hard as they can to get it to go through. And they're actually just like breaking the boat. Like they're just stopping it as they do it. So it's the same thing. It's just kind of letting the boom naturally come through.
Yeah.
And one thing as a main sheet trimmer,
top the battens.
yeah, and as a main sheet trimmer, you need to be conscious of where your traveler is. Like his traveler is too high. I try and let the traveler down a little bit, so that way the bow guy doesn't have to work so hard to keep the boom on the side, or the tactician. But the main sheet trimmer still needs to be very conscious of what his traveler and main sheet ratio is, because it's really easy to make it hard and the boom wants to come over, and then you get all chicken winged up. So that was a nice little transition. Let's see if they.
Look at that water. That must be Key West, man. We all wish we were there. Sweet.
We do. Yeah.
That's not Annapolis. That's not Chesapeake Bay for sure.
No, that is for sure Key West. I think this may actually be the very first Key West race week for the J70 when this was filmed. I'm pretty sure it was.
Yeah. Whew, that's nice. Been a while since we've been there, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the things that you take away from that, though, Alex, is how conscious Tim is of steering the boat under the kite when he's going onto the wing, and the boom just naturally coming through, and the bow guy helping with the vang when it's time. He doesn't do it too early. Like they wait to pull the vang on, but you see the boom just naturally wants to come through, and then he pops it right at the end. Well, not so much there, but eventually they do.
Yeah, the battens are struggling right there, inverted. But there's weather heel and the kite's filled. They're looking up at it. They're not panicking. He's banjoing the vang, trying to get it. One more time, pull, 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 boom, got it.
Right.
But what's nice is the boat kept going straight the whole time there. The heel angle was even. The kite stayed filled. It's nice to get it through the first shot, but sometimes it doesn't happen. But don't make a big deal about it. Just banjo the vang to get the battens to pop.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's not the end of the world if they don't pop, for sure.
So this kind of transitions us to our next slide, and you kind of saw it in the last video, but transitioning out of the wing on wing, I think that this is a very underrated maneuver. You have to be super aggressive in order to keep your speed and build apparent wind on the new jibe right away. This is you guys probably this past winter. Allan, talk us through this.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think of all of them, the one with the most potential to have a good heel and flatten is the boom over off the wing, right? Because if you go kite over, it's not quite the same. Whereas this one, the kite stays full, you're actually putting the bow up, which is putting more pressure into the kite, and then the boom's coming over and you're able to pump against it. So to me, this is what's amazing about this photo sequence is you look, we're coming off the wing, we're heeling the boat towards the kite. I mean, if you look, John's barely turning the boat and we're getting off the wing just by our body weight there, right? I mean, the rudder is really turned. It's not like there's a ton of weight coming off of it. So the rudder is actually following the boat. The boat is doing what it wants to do. We get a ton of heel, and then all of us in unison come over and flatten the boat, and you could see both sails are pressured up and we're just going forward the whole time. It's kind of like you were talking about doing a roll jibe in your laser. It's the same thing. And I think in that light air, unless you absolutely have to go kite over to get off the wing, this is a quick way to gain a boat length or so if you do it well by getting a good acceleration out of there. So I agree with you. This is a good maneuver to practice quite a bit because I think there's some gains to be made for sure.
You can check out my sister right there, not doing anything. She's getting ready for lunch. She's worried about the pizza or the sandwiches.
You
They're down below.
You better be careful. Your sister and your nephews are on this call watching this, so you know
You're gonna
get
pay for
yourself
that,
in
man.
trouble.
You're gonna pay.
Hey,
For that.
it's not as embarrassing as when they were on the front of the newsletter for illegal hiking. So you know this is a close second in embarrassment.
Dude, you're getting
But
cold.
what yeah.
You were just called out by your sister on the chat, so there you go.
So I mean, I really like this maneuver because you know even if you want to get on the next jibe, you can gain a boat length here and then roll into a really nice smooth roll jibe, and probably gain 2.5 boat lengths instead of pulling the spinnaker through. You know, kind of awkwardly waiting for everybody to then press up, and then you got to reaccelerate. It's not so good.
And a couple of things. Again, the boom is naturally falling through. You don't see John pulling on it super hard, right? And what he doesn't do necessarily is stop it in the middle as we're coming out. He lets it go to leeward, so as we're flattening, he can trim against it. Whereas if he stops it in the middle and you go to flatten and you're easing it, it does the opposite of what you want it to do. So this is the one maneuver where you're going to let it fall all the way through, and then as you're flattening, pull it on again.
All good stuff. And so one of the hardest things to pull off, and I know I suck at it. I am so bad at lazy plane jibing and lazy plane technique in general. You know, 9 times out of 10, I see Eric Doyle go flying by me on a lazy plane. Eric, you know, you're a guy in the fleet that sticks out to me as somebody who's really good at moding. And why don't you walk us through what a good lazy plane jibe is and kind of what you look for in all that?
Yeah. So again, you know, you talk about it. You say, okay, we're going to jibe, and it's very critical that the helmsman doesn't bear away and slow the boat down until everybody's ready. It shouldn't take that long, but the boat's got to be going top speed because we're just barely planing. If we come down off a plane and then turn the boat, then we've got a problem. We might as well just VMG jibe, you know, and leave it down. So we were all ready to go. We're looking for a good spot. Preferably we get it while we're surfing on a wave. The jib stays trimmed perfectly, and then as we're bearing away, it gets furled. So it's pulling the whole time. It's keeping us on the plane. The spinnaker gets pulled through pretty quickly, you know, basically as fast as it can, and the boom flops over. Again, we pull it a little bit, and then we probably don't stop it in the middle. We let it go all the way through, and we give it a couple of jerks to make sure the battens pop, and then the bow's got to keep coming up, you know, to make sure the boat gets back on the plane, because we've basically taken it off the plane. We're trying to jibe in a puff. Everybody's on the same page. Nice roll here. Jib's been furled. Boom, pops across. Everybody hits the weather rail. Bow still coming up. Kite filled easily, so the jib came right out. If the, you know, as we all know, if the kite struggles to fill, we might delay on the jib quickly. But I think it's important that the trimmer coming through the jibe, you know, is talking to the helmsman and saying, you know, keep the bow coming up, keep the bow coming up. Or if it's quite windy, you know, or windy enough, and you're already on the plane, okay, stop right there. That's a great angle. Let's keep going straight. Here we go again. Look, they're bored down, dead downwind. The jib got furled, and then boom, came right back out. I was very quick on the furl. This looks like San Francisco to me during the Worlds there, maybe the Calvi Network gal. But it's important to go into it pretty quickly and come out at the same angle or a little bit hotter to get back on the plane. That's what's hard with the lazy planing, because you're doing everything you can to get the boat up on the step and trying to keep it there. We want to make sure we finish the jibe so the boat doesn't wallow coming out of it and take a long time to get back up.
Yeah.
So that's all teamwork.
These guys are sailing with 5. That looks like there's a lot going on.
Yeah, so
Allan,
in this jibe, if you see, the kite gets through before the main, and you can see how quickly they get out and accelerate, right? Whereas if you watch the second jibe, you can see the turn is just a little slower or a little quicker, and the boom gets through first, and it's not quite as clean. That's the one thing I take away from this video. You see, like, the kite is through, they're holding low, kite fills as the boom's coming out, and then they can go bow right up, right? And if you watch the second jibe, it's a little forced on the turn to port here. You'll see they go into another jibe, the jib gets furled, but the boom is over before the kite, and you can see their acceleration is not quite as good on the second one. And that's all the timing.
I would say that you'd almost want to be wing on wing for just a brief second. Would you agree with that?
Potentially, yeah, I think so. But watch right here. See, the boom's through and the kite's not even full yet. And that's where, and then the jib comes out, kind of makes it even harder, right? So going back to what Eric said, jib can't get unfurled until the kite is fully ripping. And, you know, the rate of turn is critical. That's where the driver really needs to watch, in my opinion, the clue of the kite. And you're not getting that boom to come through until you see the clue past the headstay and even potentially getting full on the new side before you're turning harder.
I think for all the skippers out there that are watching this, we talk about the timing and the teamwork, and you're not going to get it right all the time. Don't beat yourself up if you
for sure
you blow a couple jibes during the day, because nobody, you know, there's nobody out there who sails J70s full time all the time and is practicing this, and every jibe is a little different. So
yeah,
you just got to do the best you can. Understand that you got to go into it with the boat going full speed and coming out and hitting that exit angle. It's different every time, especially if it's quite shifty. So,
right,
you know, it's a practice thing. Allan mentioned it earlier, getting out early, doing a bunch of jibes before the start. That's all about getting your timing down, and in the people in the boat, their footwork and where they sit and where they roll. It's all, you know, it's all a timing game. And to do it right is great, but
yeah,
we're going to get it wrong sometimes.
For those of you guys planning on attending the Marina Del Rey Worlds, this is a technique that you got to get comfortable with too, especially with big swell. You could be surfing, you know, you're pretty much always, I would call it lazy surfing, where you're surfing waves all the time, and picking the right time to jibe is super important. So this technique is going to be very applicable in California next year.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the next thing. We saw a lot of planing jibes at the midwinters this year. I know we wiped out on about 12 or 13 planing jibes, so I can't really say that I'm an expert at it yet. Allan, you guys won the regatta. Why don't you talk us through what's a really nice planing jibe?
I mean, there's two ways to do it, right? You can do a blow-through style jibe, or you can do a jibe similar to the one we just watched. I think the key is, to me, is just making sure that you know, again, as Eric says, it's hard for the driver because they don't do it right every time, but really watching the rate of turn and making sure the boom doesn't just come crashing over, because that's when the boats wipe out when it's windy, right? When you see the boom either get forced through or, you know, just wailing through, that's when you get in trouble. So to me, the first thing when it's windy and you're going to go into a planing jibe, as Eric said before, you got to be going as fast as you can. The worst thing you can do is like pop off a plane and get into displacement mode when it's blowing 20 plus and then try and jibe, right? Because the boat loads up and it's awful. So to me, if you're going to jibe when it's windy, you want the thing ripping, like full send it and then turn into the jibe, because everything's unloaded. And then I think as you were talking about before, it doesn't really matter which technique you're using. It's just a matter of keeping the boat flat and figuring out how to get the sails through with the least amount of resistance, because as soon as it gets low is when the boat wants to wipe out. So I'm of the opinion you can jibe either way, whether it's a blow through or the jibe like we just watched in the video. It's just a matter of how you approach it and kind of just being comfortable with your own individual technique. I don't know what Eric thinks, but
yeah, generally we thought when it was planing, if it's flatter water, the blow through jibe is a little quicker.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll talk about that in a minute. But then, you know, if there's big waves, then just doing a standard jibe, because, you know, you get the boat going fast on a big wave, you turn down a little slower. And at that moment, you know, hopefully you're on the wave, you're surfing the wave. So that's propelling you while the kite is collapsing and going to the other side. And it's a little bit safer in big waves because, you know, you've got the max acceleration, you've got the boat unloaded the most, and it can flip over to the other side without flipping you upside down. That's the key.
Right.
Biggest thing in 25 knots, everybody's got to remember, is that, you know, if you come out of that jibe upside down, you're losing so much distance that, you know, everything else doesn't really matter. In flat water, I think the blow through jibe's a little faster and a little safer. But you gotta, I think having both of them in your arsenal is important.
I agree. And I think you got to practice. Yeah.
Hey, Allan, how do you, as a trimmer, manage your sheets in the planing jibe? Say, you know, tactician calls for a jibe.
Yeah.
What is your hand movements like?
Well, I think a lot of it, honestly, is once you're going, even if you're ripping along planing, is if you need help with the bow person or whatever, but making sure your sheets are sorted, right? I mean, the worst thing you can do is just have spinnaker sheet all over the boat and then wait until the last second to jibe, right? So as soon as I feel like we're, you know, we don't do cleanup necessarily right away. And, you know, Molly's on here, so she knows that Lammy yells at us for cleaning up at all when we're coming off the windward mark. But as soon as we're like comfortable and we're going, we know there's no maneuvers and I'm just trimming the kite, I'll still clean up the sheet and kind of get it sorted by itself. So when we go to jibe, it's not everywhere, it's angled and everything. And then I try to generally have it in front of me. So when we go to jibe, I can kind of be behind it because I prefer to face forward. Some people prefer to face backwards. It kind of depends on what they do, but I more like just like to have it controlled. And if I'm going into a jibe, make sure you take the slack out. You have it, you know, up on the jib so it's not stuck on the furler. Do all that stuff pre-going into it. And if you're trimming, that's the things you're supposed to be looking for, right? I mean, you shouldn't be looking at other boats and doing other things. You're trimming the kite and getting ready to make a maneuver. So those are things that I kind of run through all the time as I'm doing. I'm sure Eric does the same thing. Maybe he doesn't, but.
And then when you go to jibe, do you just release the old one and start ripping on the new one, or how do you manage that?
Yeah, I mean, basically, if I have enough slack out of it, when we start bearing off, as soon as the boat starts bearing off, I'll hold the other one. But as soon as the windward one or the new sheet has tension, I just send it to get it through. Because if you don't ease it out and let it get away from the boat, and if you hold it to the old sheet too long, you never get the new one through quick enough. So as soon as we're like jibing in 3, 2. At 2, I already have the slack out of the new sheet, and I'm probably getting ready to, you know, smoke the old sheet and pull the new one full bore at 2, right? Because we know if you wait till the time they say jibe, they're probably almost downwind at that point. It's too late. The kite will be too far away from the boat. So I think a common mistake is people wait too long to go to the new sheet. I think you can go pretty quick because even as you trim the new sheet, it's going towards the headstay. The kite still stays full. You're just moving it quicker to the new side. It's not like it collapses. It'll only collapse if you let both sheets go.
Great. That was an excellent explanation. I know I've been doing some sailing over in Europe, and I'm trimming the spinnaker in the main, and so I have a tough time trying to manage when it gets breezy, the cadence of it all. So that was super helpful for me.
Yeah.
So this is Tim sailing downwind. We're really picking on Tim today. You know, he's got a lot of great footage out there. But Eric, what sticks out to you? These guys are just going straight. You know, this is kind of with the old rules now. Talk a little bit about the new rules and planing and how that allows you and your team to be super aggressive downwind.
Yeah, I think the biggest difference is. You know, they've allowed kind of unlimited pumping on the spinnaker, whereas before we had to be pretty careful about it. This is pretty nice here. You know, the boat's going along. It's not terribly windy because the bow person's still forward. There's nobody behind the helmsman. Boat's ripping along quite nicely. Sails are trimmed nice. Spinnaker's out in front of the boat. That's very nice. It's under control, minimal steering, but not a lot of pumping going on, but you know, they look like they're going along pretty nicely there. The boat is doing the work, in other words, you know. Looks pretty good.
Probably would like to see some more fore and aft movement, huh, Allan?
I mean, I think if it's wavy, especially, yeah, you're going to move front to back quite a bit. And, you know, the wavier it is, the more you have to pump, right? I mean, I think that's the harder part or the easier part. I mean, if you get the boat going, there's actually not a ton of load on it. The hard part is when the boat slows down and you plow into a wave and then you got to pump again to get it over it. that's when it's hard for the spin trimmer. If the boat's already planing, you know, you got a little wave there, you can do a couple pumps and get the boat going a little quicker. It goes right over it. And I think that is the one thing in planing conditions, you know, you're talking about boat handling, is getting that synchronization between the driver and the spin trimmer on pumping and even the main trimmer, when to pump and moving the bow around, and just constant communication about that. So that is the one thing I think from a boat handling perspective that's pretty important, is just talking about it and being proactive, especially when it's that windy.
Yeah. And for those of you who are in Cleveland, for the North Americans, by the way, epic event, 10 out of 10 would go back to Cleveland if we had the same conditions as we did this past year for the North Americans. But one of the techniques that we found is you can pump and move fore and aft, but you still are going to find yourself plowing into the wave in front of you. And if the spinnaker is really loaded when you're plowing in front, easing the kite will actually help the bow pop up and help you get over the wave. Then you have to be really quick to pump again to try and accelerate down the other side of it. So that coupled with fore and aft movement, you know, as you go down the wave, you want to move the weight aft. And then as the bow starts to go up over the wave, then you move all the weight forward. Both, it should be all four people moving pretty much. You know, if you really are in cadence with each other, all four players are moving at the same time. So Eric, you love the blow through jibe in flat water. I have only been able to pull it off once on a jibe set. Why don't you walk us through what it takes to pull off a good blow through jibe?
First thing it takes is you got to practice it a bunch, and hopefully this will give you guys a little bit of an idea of you know, what we do on our boat, and we practice it quite a bit. And the first thing you got to understand is that it takes a faster turn down by the helmsman. It's not a slow, gradual bear away. It's a quick bear away to get the basically past dead downwind. Okay, so that the you know, we're trying to get the kite plastered on the wrong side. We're trying to get the head to blow through so that the clew follows. So the jib is staying out the whole time so that the kite doesn't wrap around the forestay. So we say, okay, stand by, blow through jibe. And what happens is the bow person will trim the jib in a little bit. It won't be far out. It'll trim it in 3/4 of the way. And then when we do it, I hand the spin sheet now off to the bow person, because the kite comes in as well. The kite comes into where the clew comes back about to the shrouds. So this is happening while the boat is turning down quite quickly. So that's why I'm talking about practice and timing. It's not we do this and then we do that. This is happening at the same time. If the bow guy actually has like both hands, he's pulling both the jib and the spinnaker in at the same time, because when the kite blows through, the jib trimmer has to be hand over hand. He's basically taking up the slack because the clew is whipping around the front of the boat and going back to where it wants to go. And you need a lot of hand speed. The thing I really like about it is it's not so hard. It's not like it's hand over hand pulling as hard as you can and pulling the kite around. It's going where it wants to go, and it happens fast. So we do a quick bear away, jib and kite come in. Spinnaker trimmer is trimming the new sheet and looking at the spinnaker, and he yells cut, because a lot of times the jib trimmer or the bow person doesn't have time. He's got so much going on. His head's down, making sure he's not stepping on the sheets, and he's got the jib in and the kite in enough. And then he just lets go of the sheet. And that brings the clew around. It blows around. The new kite sheet comes on just as fast as it can. Like I said, it takes two people on the sheet to do that. And then right away, you start talking about the angle, you know, because it's quite hard, because the turn down is much quicker. And the exit, the kite fills very quickly. So if it's really windy and you're too hot, you know, you might flip over. But if you come out at just at the right angle, which is just past dead downwind, your odds of flipping over are much less. And then you talk very quickly about getting the bow back up and getting the boat back on a plane. And like I said earlier, in big waves, probably better to do a normal jibe, but the blow through jibe, you'll be amazed. When you do it right, the spinnaker goes through the fore triangle so fast and gets you on the new jibe so quickly. You know, it's really nice to do if you're sailing along and you're pinned, you know, there's someone just to leeward of you a little bit. He's on starboard and you want to just wait for him to put the bow up slightly and you just turn the boat and cross his bow. It's pretty powerful. I recommend everybody try it out, but practice it a lot. I mean, I'm telling you probably got to do, you know, 30 or 40 of these to just get the technique down and be comfortable doing it and pulling it off, you know, 50% of the time. You do like 100 of these, you can pull it off almost all the time. We do it in over, anytime we think it'll blow through pretty fast, you know, over 12, 14 knots. Over 14 knots, for sure, we can pull it off in flat water, and we believe it's faster.
Great. That's an awesome insight. Unfortunately, Tim Healy has not made a YouTube video on how to do a blow-through jibe. So I think Eric is now going to be tasked with a North instructional video on blow-through jibes.
All right, we'll work on that.
We'll get a drone. We'll make it perfect.
Exactly.
Allan, do you have anything to add to the blow-through
No, I mean,
jibe?
I think he's pretty much covered everything. I think the only thing that you might need to do is when you trim the kite, sometimes you just gotta be careful of the clew getting high, right? So sometimes you may need to actually push the old sheet with the clew down so that that'll help the head turn inside out. If it gets not trimmed enough or gets too high, sometimes the head stays the old way before it jibes. So sometimes you just gotta push the sheet down. But I think that's about it. Yeah.
Cool. So now we're going to talk about takedowns. And this is the same video that we saw earlier in the presentation. I'm going to fast forward it. So Allan, this is you guys. Why don't you walk through your takedown here?
So we're doing a windward drop, and you know, obviously first thing is jib out. I think that's, you know, the rule is you should have two sails working all the time. So jib out before you start taking the kite down. And then I think a lot of it is communication. It doesn't really matter who's necessarily doing what job, but realizing that, you know, on a windward drop, you got to basically overhaul the windward sheet until the clew is at least past the headstay before you start doing anything. So for me on this drop, I'm always, you know, pulling the kite around, and I probably would call for the halyard first and start getting, once the clew is, you know, to that part, halyard first. So I would say halyard, pull, tack. And that way I could start pulling the sail into the boat. And I usually go leech first into the bag, and then the sail goes on top. And I think one of the keys is making sure that you blow the pole when you're going to do the tack line. Don't uncleat the tack line, because if you uncleat the tack line, the pole doesn't come in. If you undo the pole, the first pull of the sail, you actually pull the pole into the boat, and then you can undo the tack line and get the rest of the sail in. These guys do it here really well. But if you look, they have the clew, the halyard's off, the pole is still out, and then they undo it and they get the whole thing in that way. And if you see, Lammy's super quick about getting the kite in the boat, but it's, you know, the leech of the sail first, and then the luff goes on top. So when they're going to set, the tack is right there, everything's ready to go, and it probably won't be twisted or have any issues that way. The issue generally is if you start throwing the middle or the top of the sail into the bag first, and then you try and hoist it, it's when you get twists and all that stuff. So if you look on almost all these, you know, the leech ends in first, and then the tack and the head are going in generally last because they're the first to come out.
Yeah, big hand pulls. Yeah. You know, Lammy has tremendous hand speed here. It's almost like he's grinding a pedestal on the AC-45 again. Yeah. But, you know, he gets it in the bag quickly. Notice how there's Molly doing a great job trimming the jib, making sure that it's not over trimmed, and Jake is trimming the main in as he goes around. Lammy's on the final little cleanup, and you know, you did a great job in the previous clip of, as a jib trimmer, getting your legs out, especially if it's windy, quickly, so the boat doesn't just heel over. But the main sheet guy really has to make sure that his backstay, traveler, main sheet are all lined up, and the jib person just has to make sure that the halyard is right and get it to a soft mark where they can cleat the leeward sheet and pull on the windward sheet.
Yeah, and don't over trim the jib, right? Because you're trying to get the bow up, and that's, you know, as you were saying before, it's crucial not to have the jib trimmed to your trim marks before you start turning up, or the bow just doesn't get up, right?
Yeah, and here's another instructional video by Tim Healy.
Yeah.
On some takedowns, and Allan, we had a few comments on on his douses. What
Yes.
would you like to say about
So
that?
this one shows pretty clean what happens if you don't undo the pole first, where if you uncleat the tack line, you can see they struggle to get the pole to come in. Right, you'll see it right about there. The tack line's off, but the pole is still out. And if you're at a crowded mark rounding, I mean, Tim's always in first, so he doesn't have to worry about hitting anyone with his pole. But for the rest of us, you know, when you're there in a crowded thing, you got to get the pole in so you don't hit anybody with it. The other thing that we noticed, which is different, is they try and grab the middle of the kite first and get that part in and leave the rest out, which is just different. I'm not saying it's wrong. It's just a different way to do it. I know when Tim was sailing, they probably didn't have a spinnaker bag. So that might be part of the reason too, why they're maybe throwing it the boat differently, because they were just throwing it down below instead of into a bag the way, you know, people do now. So.
Eric, what are your comments?
Yeah, it's pretty nice. It is best to get the pole uncleated first. I know in the heat of the moment, a lot of times I just let everything go and hope for the best, but it's definitely best to get the pole off first, and then have them screaming for the tack, especially on a lure drop. You know, if it's breezy, you let them both go, the tack can get in the water, and we all know how hard that is.
Well, I think the other key to takedowns is whoever's releasing to the person that's pulling the kite in, don't let anything go until they actually call for it. Like, there's nothing worse than someone's like, they're trying to do a windward drop and trying to get the clue around, and before you have the clue fully around, they let the halyard go and the kite just takes off, right? So wait until you get the call for each line from that person, unless you can see it's 100% they're ready for it, because sometimes, you know, people just uncleat everything and that's where you end up shrimping. And once that happens, you lose piles of boats.
I think that's motivation.
That could be motivation. Yeah.
When they see that halyard zipping out, the hand speed goes way up, man. They used to motivate Max. When he saw that thing flying out in front of the boat, it came in way faster.
And maybe that's true. Maybe that's
he never dropped it in the water. That was cool.
I'm pretty lazy, so maybe that's my problem. I mean, the one thing that somebody did tell me is, you know, it's pretty rare that you hear people ripping their kites from someone pulling it in fast, right?
Exactly.
So I don't think you have to worry. You don't have to worry about sail ripping because you're going to pull it in so fast.
No.
So
no.
You know,
exactly.
get at it, right? I think that's
I use it as motivation. When they see it uncleated, they get it in.
They just hear the cleat open, and that's enough.
You hear that?
One thing that I would recommend.
Yeah.
I sail with this guy, Oren Starr, and Oren is an animal on the bow. He'll go and breathe, and he'll stand up on the rail, especially if it's a weather douse, and he will get the leech of the kite first, way up in the air, and then kind of his first pull is straight into the bag.
Yeah.
So that way it allows him to then, you know, his next pull will be even taller, or not as tall, but he'll have a bigger range of motion, rather than kind of standing in the companionway and kind of chipmunking it into the middle. You just want big, long pulls, and it all starts with making sure that the bow person has enough leverage to get it into the boat. Another thing is good helmsmen will buy their crew time. If they see it's not quite going right, you know, making a little bit of a wider start to your mark rounding. But the helms person can't just turn the boat around the mark. You know, they got to make sure that everything is kind of looking right. But anywhere where they can auger, you see it in big TP52s with takedown systems where they auger down quickly to collapse the kite. You know, the same kind of goes here, where the helmsman just needs to buy his crew some time to do it properly. Sorry, Allan, to cut you off.
No. What I was saying is the other thing we have to remember is when you're taking it down to grab the kite above the lazy sheet, right?
Yeah.
I'm not really sure why you have to do that, but it seems like you have to do it.
Better on the set.
Yeah, I think it is better on the set.
Because otherwise you're dragging it out under the sheet. Instead, you're going over the top.
There you go.
It's not the end of the world, but it's just a nicer setting.
Yeah.
So, boys, that brings us to the end of our presentation. Do you have any final thoughts on life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness in J70 world for our audience?
I would say take the time to just, you know, if you can't go sailing, do some boat work, you know, keep talking to your crew, you know, find fun things to do, keep watching these webinars. I mean, there's plenty of stuff to do. you know, make your boat nice and perfect. So when the time comes, it's ready to rock. I think that's the best thing you can do. So.
Looks like we have a few, just thank yous from everybody. And if anybody has any questions, you know, about their J70 or their Star boat, or my case, the Layman 12, or any other weird one design boats that we're freakishly obsessed with, here's our contact information. We love to kind of shoot the wind about sailing, and we really, really hope to see all of you soon. So thanks again. Thanks, boys.
Thanks, Alex.